Hello everyone, Stormer1 here. Today we'll be talking about the potential for some strong storms over the next couple of days, including the threat for some severe weather, especially on Friday. We're going to get started with satellite imagery across the state. It's been a pretty nice day out there. We had some showers and even a couple of thunderstorms that initiated from our departing upper level low across parts of central and northern Kentucky. But tonight our focus is going to be off to our southwest, where we have a warm front that is moving through western Kentucky. That's going to move off to the northeast, and that warm front looks to initiate some showers and thunderstorms, especially when it gets into central Kentucky, and that could bring the potential for some hail out there. And we'll talk a little more about that here in a minute. Here's a look at the current air temperatures across Kentucky. It's pretty mild and even warm in western Kentucky, upper 70s to low 80s. It's cooler in the eastern part of the state, but by tomorrow it's going to feel more like summer, where you have temperatures mid to upper 80s. Maybe a couple of places may flirt with 90 degrees tomorrow. So tomorrow looking to be a summer-like day with dew points in the low 70s. And if you look at dew points right now, you can actually kind of see where your warm front actually is. I placed the warm front in the wrong spot. The warm front looks to be right about here. You can see dew points on the north and east side of the warm front. Out ahead of it is in the low 60s. Meanwhile, behind it, it's in the mid to upper 60s to around 70. Dew point of 71 in Broward County out there in western Kentucky. And that humid air mass will move up here across the rest of the state tonight and throughout the day tomorrow, and that should give us plenty of storm fuel for tomorrow. So here's the storm prediction outlook for today. We actually got a slight risk for severe weather for parts of Dakotas and Nebraska, and then we have a margin risk that's out for portions of the Carolinas, Mid-Atlantic, and even parts of the Ohio Valley, which includes a pretty decent chunk of central Kentucky out there. And this, once again, the primary threat looks to be hail, to possibly some large hail in a couple of those storms, and they'll stay isolated in nature. Not everybody's going to see a storm tonight, but anybody that does see a pretty good storm could see the possibility of some hail, and hail could be up the size of quarters at times as well. So that's the first day we're going to be talking about here. So let's go and talk about that. And we're actually going to use the high-res NAM here. And you can see here how the high-res NAM does initiate some strong to locally severe storms a little bit farther to the northeast with the high-res NAM. Some other models like to initiate a little bit earlier, a little bit farther to the southwest. But regardless of that, that doesn't change in the fact that there's going to be strong severe storm potential later tonight. If I were to look at the supercell composite parameter here, they're not really that impressive out there. Values are really below a 2, which is not really something to really write off about. But you can clearly see where your warm front is out here. And surface-based instability will have some of that, but there's likely to be a layer of stable air out there. But above that stable layer of air is more unstable air up there. They'll likely be higher than the surface-based instability here. And it may take a minute to get a forecast sounding out there. My internet is running slow, so I do apologize for that. But you can kind of see here instability generally anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 joules per kilogram through the evening out there. And if we go back to our sounding here, you can kind of see here that the air does try to become more stable in the lower parts of the atmosphere. But if you go farther up, you can see here we got a little bit more of an unstable air mass, even with a pretty solid elevated mix layer. So we got a strong elevated mix layer that's in place. And these type of indicators can indicate the potential for some hail or even locally large hail out there. And when you look at your wind shear parameters here, wind shear in low levels is weaker compared to upper levels, which can also support the potential for some hail out there as well. So then again, main hazard for tonight is going to be hail to marginally severe hail, which means hail that could be up to size quarters and maybe a little bit bigger. So that's tonight. Here is tomorrow, and there's an enhanced risk north of Kentucky here. Let me go back to this site here. You can see that enhanced risk has been expanded and includes most of Wisconsin, even gets down into northeastern Illinois, northern Indiana, and southwestern Michigan. It does include the Chicagoland area. And if we look to our tornado risk, there is a 10% hatched tornado risk, so potential is there for some strong tornadoes up in Wisconsin, but primary threats damage and winds and large hail, and a hatched area indicates the potential for significant hail. If I go back to the statewide view, you can see here you got the margin risk out across portions of central and eastern Kentucky, and then the slight risk includes, I want to say approximately, there's not really a good highway corridor for this. I probably want to say roughly 127 and west. That's where they have the slight risk area as of right now. And Thursday risk remains conditional, but there has been some changes in the weather model guidance here for tomorrow, and that's what I want to really talk about here. And if we go back to the high risk NAM here, you can kind of see here as you get into Thursday afternoon that it does try to initiate a couple of storms out there, but it kind of dissipates here, and it's because the high risk NAM thinks there's still going to be a pretty good cap in place. But I will say this, if I were to once again pull up the Super composite, the numbers are not as impressive as compared to yesterday, but they're still more than adequate to support severe weather. The Super composite parameters anywhere from about 4 to 10 would be quite favorable for us. And you'll be able to see on a forecast sounding here. Let's go south of Louisville. Let's go to Shepherdsville and get a forecast sounding out there to see what's going on here. And if you remember from my past video when we talked about the cap inversion, and if we were to go back and compare it to this new sounding, you're probably going to notice a little bit of a difference with the cap here. And here you go here. And really kind of remains the same on some of the stuff. Instability, still got a high amount of instability out there. Surface-based CAPE, 4,800. That's probably a little bit overdone, but then again, very unstable atmosphere. You still have strong lap rates out there. DCAPE is up as high as 1,400. And your hodograph would support not just very large hail, but also the potential for some supercells out there. Low-level shear has notably increased for tomorrow. And with that, the cap is a little bit weaker compared to yesterday. Because if I were to go to the 700 millibar winds, this is the newest run here. You can kind of see here we got a pretty decent shortwave coming in from the west here. And if I were to compare it to the run this time yesterday, you can, and I'll click back and forth here, you can clearly see that the winds at 700 millibars is stronger. And with that, that can help weaken the cap, which is something we talked about yesterday. If you get stronger winds at 850 and even 700 millibars, that can help weaken the cap here. And that's what the high risk NAM kind of shows today. Stronger upper level winds helping to weaken the cap a little bit here. Now, a model like the HER shows it even stronger. And it's got winds across parts of central and western Kentucky upwards of 50 to 60 knots out there. And it's definitely not as strong across central Kentucky compared to the high risk NAM, but it kind of follows a similar trend here. A little bit of a stronger shortwave, potentially weakening the cap. And if that scenario ends up playing out, then we could have a couple of thunderstorms that initiates tomorrow afternoon that goes through the evening. In the main hazard, it's going to be large to very large hail, which means hail that could be greater than 2 inches in diameter. Damage and winds is also there, and I cannot rule out an isolated tornado. With a stronger shortwave, you help strengthen the low shear vectors, and that can help increase the risk for some supercells out there and possibly even a tornado. So overall, tomorrow is uptrended a little bit here, mainly because of the weaker cap and the stronger shortwave here. Now, the higher SNAM still does initiate much of anything here. But there are some other model guidance out there, like the HRRR, that do show a pretty decent complex of thunderstorms. So there's still a decent amount of uncertainty tomorrow of how strong that cap's going to be. But the trend as of right now, it's been trending weaker. And if it continues to trend weaker, then I will be a little bit more concerned about tomorrow. Because like I said earlier, potential or the environment is favorable for some big time hailstones out there, and I think that's the primary concern. Damage winds and even an isolated tornado is also possible. So, and that's also one of the reasons why they expanded the slight risk back into Kentucky, because of that weaker cap trend. And I think they're kind of seeing the same thing here. And if the cap does continue to trend weaker, you could expect the slight risk to be expanded farther to the east. As well. So we really got to keep an eye on trends for tomorrow, especially tonight and into tomorrow morning. And we'll see where we're at with the model guidance by tomorrow morning to see if the cap continues to trend weaker, especially on the NAM family. The NAM family still shows that cap. The HRRR actually doesn't out there. So, yeah, we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on trends for tomorrow. And then the big day, which is Friday, the SPC has upgraded portions of the Ohio Valley and an enhanced risk for severe weather out there. And it does include parts of Kentucky, of course, and it mainly includes portions of northern and western Kentucky. If you want my opinion, the enhanced risk needs to be expanded to the south and southeast. If I was the SPC, I would include these areas in here. You can maybe argue a little bit farther out than that, but I would certainly include these areas in the enhanced risk, and a moderate risk upgrade is not out of the question here for Friday. Now, but remember, Thursday storms, wherever we could see tomorrow, can impact the next day, which is Friday, and that's important to note here, because if that weaker cap trend continues, then those storms that do fire could have an impact for Friday's setup. And we'll go back to the high-risk NAM here, and you can kind of see some of the storms that do fire out there in western Kentucky kind of die out. But as you kind of get into late Thursday night into Friday morning, I think there's likely going to be some thunderstorms that initiate in western Kentucky here. And I think the high-risk NAM's a little bit underdone here, if I'm going to be honest with you. If I were to jump over to the HRRR model here around the same time here, and honestly think this is a little bit more accurate, it does show some thunderstorms initiating in western Kentucky. Now, the main hazard with these here would be large hail. Kind of similar to what we're dealing with tonight. Anytime you get through the overnight hours, you usually create a layer of stable air, and you do create some elevated instability. The instability becomes more elevated than compared to the surface here. And, excuse me, if I were to go to the supercell composite here and go back to the high-risk NAM at around the same time here, you can see our conditions are still favorable for severe weather out there, even through late Thursday night into Friday morning, especially if it's left untapped out there. And we'll get a sounding out there in south central Kentucky to see what it shows. But while that's loading here, I'm going to go, sorry if I'm jumping around a lot, go back to the HRRR and show the progression of this cluster of thunderstorms here. So you can kind of see it actually initiates in northeastern Arkansas, southeastern Missouri. And I think this is a realistic solution here. And I think it can turn into an organized cluster here. And I think for the most part, these storms here generally stay elevated, which means the main hazard of these will be large hail. But there can still be the potential for some strong winds with this. The potential is still there for that. And you can see that cluster of strong to severe storms Friday morning and even to early Friday afternoon, moves into eastern Kentucky and eventually moves out into West Virginia. And then new thunderstorms initiate off back to our west out there. If we go back to our sounding here, you can kind of see here maybe a little bit too aggressive with the surface-based instability here, but there's still going to be instability out there regardless here, and I think instability will be more elevated. You can also see the winds, kind of towards the surface out here is fairly weak, but as you get farther up in the atmosphere, you'll definitely notice how the winds certainly pick up the farther up you go. But what the sounding here would support would be large hail, some strong winds, and I think the tornado risk will stay very low here. As long as the storms stay elevated with this round of storms, there shouldn't be a tornado risk with it, as long as they stay elevated out there. But if they do become surface-based, and then you increase the risk for damaging winds and maybe an isolated tornado out there. So there's that wave. Now, this cluster of thunderstorms may put down a boundary somewhere down towards the south here, maybe down into Tennessee here. And it wouldn't surprise me if that cluster of thunderstorms Friday morning tries to initiate some new storms farther off to the south out there. Right now, none of the models show that, but knowing my experience with weather models when it comes to morning convection, they usually don't do a very good job, and sometimes they under-convect as well, or kill the storms too early out there. If I were to jump back to the high-risk NAM here, you can see how it initiates those storms, but it kills them. That's not going to happen. Those storms will likely continue off to the east and northeast. And now, all models suggest that the atmosphere will recover. Now, the upper level winds are from the west to east. So the high thin cloud cover from the morning storm should be pushed off to the east. And I think we'll get some sunshine mixed in here as we get towards Friday afternoon. That should help recover the atmosphere here, or reload the atmosphere. And you'll be able to tell here from the surface-based instability here. And we'll actually jump back to the HER model because I think it's got a better look to this. So there's your thunderstorm clusters right here. You can start to see what happens here when you start to get some clearing. The atmosphere begins to recover here, especially across southern and even western Kentucky. I think western Kentucky will likely recover, but it might be a little more uncertain for areas like in eastern Kentucky here. It just depends on the exact timing of that second wave of storms here. And then we start to watch off to our west here. And you can see here the HER suggests that we will likely fully recover for the next wave of storms, which you can see cluster of thunderstorms building up in eastern Missouri and even some storms firing up out ahead of it. At the same time, if I were to move back to the high-risk NAM, you kind of see a similar evolution here. But another thing you also notice is that it's generally farther off to the south compared to SPC's enhanced risk area. There's some models that are a little bit farther north, and there's some other models that keep it to the south. My opinion is I think it's going to be more focused towards the south here. And I've seen this happen a lot in previous severe weather setups here, especially last year, where, like at this point today, the severe weather risk is farther up to the north and it ends up trending towards the south because of the morning wave of storms out there. So it wouldn't surprise me if the severe weather focus area, like where the SPC has the current enhanced risk, starts to focus far off to the south, more into Kentucky out there, and even to portions of Tennessee as well. And of course here your atmosphere does recover. Surface-based instability it's up towards 4,000 joules per kilogram. So a very unstable atmosphere. It's going to be humid. It's also going to be decently mild. And right above that is where you have a pretty good jet streak here. And this is the regular NAM model. And you can see here off to our west is a pretty solid jet streak out there. And this is a very unique severe weather setup, because what you have going on here is that you got a ridge of high pressure down towards the Gulf Coast here. So over Florida and even some of the Gulf Coast states. At the same time, we have this upper level low that's kind of sitting around in the upper Midwest, during around Minnesota. With this type of setup here, right in between these two here is where you're going to get a tighter pressure gradient, which means the winds increase. So the winds get stronger in between here. And we're going to so happen to be in between the ridge of high pressure and low pressure here. And with certainly a strong surface low here, you can certainly expect that these winds, not only at the surface but even in the upper levels, is going to get stronger at the same time as well. So it's quite a unique setup here. And this low up here is not going to move around a whole lot on Friday. What's going to do here is that it moves over to Minnesota and maybe into parts of Wisconsin by Friday here. And then it finally ejects off to the east by Saturday here. So it comes in pretty quick into Dakotas and Minnesota, kind of hangs around, and then by Saturday it goes away into the Great Lakes. So there's a lot of moving pieces in this setup here, but it's definitely unique here. It's not a typical severe weather setup, especially for us here in Kentucky. But we got a solid amount of wind energy. There's also going to be a ton of lift in the atmosphere. You got a ton of instability at the same time. With all these ingredients coming together, you can expect a lot of severe weather. And this is why Friday is so concerning here, because you got moderate shear, a lot of lift, and a lot of instability. With that type of combination, you're just going to get a lot of severe weather, and it can be widespread in some cases here. And I think Friday has potential to be widespread out there. If we were to go back to the high-risk NAM, go look to the supercell composite, you can see here the numbers are quite high out there. And if I were to get a forecast sounding in central Kentucky here, you get supercell composite value of a 10. And you're going to see here on this forecast sounding where it would support all modes of severe weather out there. And while that forecast sounding loads, let's check out reflectivity here. So that wave of thunderstorms moves off to the east here into West Virginia, and then we're going to get a new wave of thunderstorms that develops in Missouri here. And you're going to see these first initiate as supercells. I think greatest tornado potential will probably be west of Kentucky, just because there's going to be quite a few supercells out there. There is that chance we see some supercells out here as well. I'm not going to rule out the chance for supercells out here in Kentucky. But what's going to happen is that those supercells is going to merge into a monster line of storms. And I think this line of storms could be very nasty out there. And even out ahead of the line, you can see here high-risk NAM shows a supercell in western Kentucky here. And then you got this monster cluster of thunderstorms here that may move quickly across western Kentucky, through central Kentucky, and eventually into the eastern part of the state by Friday night here. And I'll tell you guys, by the environment here, if we look at the forecast sounding, that's pretty good a ways ahead of the line. You can see a very unstable atmosphere out there. You got instability going potentially north of 4,000 joules per kilogram. You got decape up to 1,300. Strong mid-level lap rates, which leads to a pretty good elevated mix layer. Low shear could improve a little bit, but it's expected to trend stronger as we get towards the evening out there. But either way, upper level shears could be quite strong or moderate to strong, And then you can see your holograph would support supercells and also some large hail. So based off the sounding and the setup for Friday, the potential is there for damaging winds. Some of those winds can be significant, which means winds that could be north of 75 miles an hour. Large hail, and I think there's potential for some very large hail. Possibility for hail that could be up to the size of tennis balls, maybe even baseball-sized hail, especially if we get supercells to initiate out ahead of that line. And then a few tornadoes are also in play as well. Strong tornado threat is still very questionable right now, but I still do think we can get a few tornadoes for Friday. And then again, some changes are still possible Friday. Like I said earlier in the video, whatever happens tomorrow can impact Friday's setup. So, and that's something we're still trying to iron out. But I think regardless of the scenarios here, I think the environment is very conducive for a significant severe weather outbreak for Friday. And then after Friday, the weather trends quite a bit nicer. There'll probably be some leftover showers and thunderstorms. If we go back to the regular NAM real quick, and you'll be able to see the possibility of some of those showers, maybe some thunderstorms may linger in the southeastern Kentucky here for Saturday morning, but I think Saturday is going to be a pretty nice day out there, and Sunday some storms may return as another warm front starts to approach from the southwest. And we'll have more updates on Thursdays and even especially Friday's potential tomorrow as well. So definitely stay tuned for more weather updates as we get closer, especially for Friday. But anyways, guys, that's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Guys, like this video, hit that like button. If you really like my channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications, never miss an upload. If you guys got any questions, put in the comment section down below. I answer you guys questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.